No, hey, just reading up my notes. We're going to be interviewing the one and only Micheal Avon Oeming on this here episode of Collector's Confessions.
He's writing one of our favorite books that are out right now called Blue Book. It's about alien abductions based on true stories. Absolutely fantastic. That's the reason why we had him on. But he's responsible for some of the greatest comics to come out in the last couple of years. Powers, Bulletproof Monk,
Mice Templar.
He did a Judge Dredd run for DC, which was the only one outside of 2000 AD.
Yep.
He's worked on tons and tons of things, independent, DC, Marvel. He worked on Thor for a little while. So we were lucky enough to have him come on the show. Here's our interview with Micheal Avon Oeming. You want to start? Yeah. So, as we said in the intro, we are lucky enough to have Micheal Avon Oeming on today. He is writing one of our favorite books out right now, Blue Book, and he agreed to sit and chat with us for an undisclosed amount of time. It might happen
until I'm like,
until one of us passes out.
I'll probably be first.
So before we really get into it, just tell us about what you have coming up. What's your next project as Blue Book? The next Blue Book series is going for how many issues?
5 issues. So the first trade is the whole concept is about UFOs, but from almost more of a journalistic point of view. Like, we're not trying to exaggerate anything or create extra drama or anything. So there you go. That's the first trade that's out through Dark Horse Comics, written by James Tynion. And it's about the first abduction story, modern day abduction story in the United States with Betty and Barney Hill.
Right. Now, and it's bordering on nonfiction in a way.
I mean, I consider it nonfiction. There's I have a real interest in just like sort of weird history or whatever, and somebody's experiences are their experiences, right? Like, so, like, let's say Betty and Barney Hill was not abducted by aliens. I believe they still had some sort of event that they believed that this is what it was, and there's a whole bunch, there's a super wide range of explanations for this sort of stuff. And of course they could have just been really crazy and making stuff up, One of the most for those not familiar with their story, one of the most compelling parts of their stories is this took place in the 1950s with an interracial couple who had careers. So to draw attention to yourself at that time period with something like this would destroy your career anyway. And then on top of it, to have that sort of danger of stuff going on, that adds a lot of credence to why would you say this stuff, right? So I definitely believe something happened, whether you could call it a psychotic break, an actual abduction. There's all these other weirder, fringier explanations for the supernatural phenomenon. And I kind of think, if I have to hedge my bets on something, it's just that we kind of live in some sort of consciousness-driven universe, and sometimes things break down, because the way that we perceive things. I think something could be interfering with our consciousness, because these stories have all these commonalities that go back over time. And when you look at them, they all sort of reflect the time that they're taking place in. So like in the 1950s, a lot of the ships had landing gears and bolts, little details like that. And everything's like a light ship, and nothing lands with landing gears. And, there was this hot air balloon alien abductions in the 1850s and stuff like that. So I think there's some sort of not like a psychic breakdown, but there's there's something the way that we perceive the universe that, whether there's something tangential close to us, some sort of interdimensional thing that's slipping through, or if that's happening, but only on a conscious level or subconscious level. So it might not be physically happening, but it could feel very much. I don't know. I just know that people, not everybody is as crazy as their stories are. There's plenty of people who, and I know people have had experiences, and I believe them. I can't explain them,
Right, but there's more than one person, and it's been happening for years and years. How did you get pulled into working on Blue Book?
One of the great things about being older and having been around in comics for a while is now there's generations of people who've grown up reading your work. So Tynion, who's blown up the field, he's really become another one of these kind of giant authors. Was a fan of Powers, and I had reached out to him I think when I saw Department of Truth, and I was like, holy shit, dude, you like, I'm sorry. Can
Don't worry. We put this for adults, not for kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was like, holy shit, you broke the code. You figured out how to do X-Files without doing X-Files or repeating any of that, but capturing that feeling of it. So we just started like a short communications thing, and I did a cover for him. And then when that Substack deal came around, he already knew that I was interested in UFOs through talking about weird stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it was the perfect opportunity to do something really experimental, because typically we wouldn't do a book like Blue Book in the direct market. It doesn't naturally feel like it has an audience there, but the way that this deal with Substack was structured was kind of like, oh, you can do anything and then publish it, but you've already got the safety net of the Substack thing. So it was this wild, like a bucket list kind of thing. I had always wanted to do a very journalistic look at the phenomenon, because I grew up on shows like In Search of with Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
And those were so creepy. And they just set this great tone. And there was a show called Sightings in the 1990s that would come on right after X-Files.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think we're on the same generational.
Yeah, I would think we're both in our early 50s. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Me too. So I had always wanted to do something like that, but it didn't make sense to be able to do it in the direct comics market. But now it is. And even without Substack, what's interesting is how it's scary in ways that the normalcy of comics have broken down, but also exciting because it's opened up other opportunities to do stuff. And there's a whole bunch of books that I'm going to do now that I no longer have to worry specifically about the direct market. It will still be in the direct market, but up till now it had to be like kind of actiony genre stuff specifically. Yes. So a book like this would just be like, oh, wasn't that cute? They tried that,
Right. Yeah.
But now it's doing well, and I'm very grateful for it.
I'll tell you a funny story about it. I read a lot of comics, so I get my pull list, my weekly pull list. I probably get about 25 comics a week, and awesome. I spend a lot of my time in the house reading comics. And as you will see, I have all the issues of the first series of Blue Book.
Yeah.
But I also have this, and this is not for me. So my wife saw me reading this one day, and she was like, "Oh, what's that?" And I'll tell you, I sit there, I read Batman, I read, X-Men, I read Superman. She won't say a word. She sees this, and she's like, "Oh, what are you reading?" And I explained to her what it was, and she was like, "Oh, I might like that." So I actually gave her, this was her birthday gift this year. I bought her this for her birthday, and it's going to be the first comic book she ever reads is Blue Book, just because she saw me reading it, and I don't remember what issue it was, but she saw the cover and she was like, "Wow, that looks interesting. What are you reading?" It's not my normal Superman.
I love that, and my favorite thing is hearing of like people who don't read comics picking up comics, or people that left comics, and we got that a lot with Powers. There's a lot of people that left comics, and somebody recommended them Powers, and that kind of got them back into it. And that is like the highest compliment I can find.
It will be her first comic book ever, like the first time she's going to sit and read. And she reads a lot. She reads a lot of books and stuff, but this will be her first comic. And she said, "I would really like to read that," but I figured I don't want her to read my copies.
Don't stuff it up.
I bought the trade, and I'll buy the next one when it comes out too.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So I read online that you're really interested in mythology, especially Norse mythology. And and even though it's not Norse, has that had any of that mythological ideas? Has that birthed William of Newbury?
Oh, for sure. I mean, all this stuff kind of goes back to mythology. Like, I mean, the wonderful thing about mythology is how often it draws parallels to either other stories or current things happening, or just basic psychology.
Yeah.
So Newbury has a lot of folklore in it. Weirdly, so William of Newbury is it's an anthropomorphic book that takes place. It's about a medieval monk. Takes place during the 11th century or 12th century, during a time called the Anarchy. So this happens during a real time period, and I'm calling it a true story. Despite being like raccoons and all this kind of stuff, because it is based on the writings of William of Newburgh, who was the first historian in England. And he wrote about this time period called the Anarchy, where there was this fight between this king and a queen, and she was supposed to be the first queen of England, but there was like you can't because you're a woman and all this kind of stuff. And there was there was a civil war, and it was this long period of time called the Anarchy, where there nobody was really in charge and all this crazy stuff. So it's real history, and along this real history, he's also writing about stories about how in Buckinghamshire this guy keeps coming out of the grave and scaring everybody at night, and
Yeah.
he's just reporting the stories as real stories because they were living, he's a medieval Christian monk living in a time where evil and ghosts and angels and all that stuff was a real tangible thing. So
I'm starting to see
I'm retelling all of those stories, or four of them, and as true stories. I mean, that's what they said.
I'm starting to see a through line now with Blue Book in a way, when you're talking about these sort of quote unquote supernatural experiences that that are different depending on time period. Like if William of Newburgh had lived now, maybe it would have been aliens that he had been seeing, or somehow the culture sort of shapes the experience in a way.
100%. In fact, so it's funny. This is very cyclical. So I'm doing William of Newbury because of a short story that I did in the back of Blue Book called The Green Children.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so The Green Children is a story about, and it took place during this time period, and it was William of Newbury, Newburgh was one of the people who recorded the stories.
Yeah.
So this original story was about these two green children who just showed up out of a cave. They didn't speak any English or anything, and they were malnourished. They didn't understand the foods that were being fed to them and stuff. And they eventually learned English. One of them died. And the story that she had was that they were from this other land called St. Martin's Land. And if you play Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you can meet these kids and stuff. It's pretty cute.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So she grows up being just a regular person, and that's her recollection of where she comes from. And then there's the idea is that she's probably a displaced person from, I think, Flemish people had settled in the land, and there was all this war, and a bunch of them were killed. So she was probably, her and her brother wandered off on their own. They didn't speak the language and stuff, and they were malnourished, and maybe that's why they were green.
Yeah.
We don't know. But that was a story, and I did that in the back of Blue Book for one of the true weird stories.
Yeah.
So then as I did more research, and I realized about this William of Newbury or Newburgh, both names are correct. It just depends on what part of the country you're at.
Right.
I want to tell more of his stories. It's right in my wheelhouse. Obviously I'm a big fan of Mike Mignola, and Hellboy was integral to my formation as a comic creator and stuff. So I had a lot of those vibes. But I was thinking, but what's going to really set it apart? And I had missed doing Mice Templar. I had missed doing some of the anthropomorphic stuff. I was like, oh, that'll be great. So actually, let me answer your question quick. So in that story, The Green Children, like it's very much like the UFO lore now is very much like fairy lore about being abducted, having your children swapped out, weird genetic stuff.
Yeah.
The parallels are right there. And I'm not the first person to think about this. Obviously, this theory that's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's true. And it's interesting how all these things became cyclical, and they keep bringing me back to the same kind of stuff. And really excited for it.
That's funny. It's like something that would have shown up in like 40 and Times back in like the 70s or 80s,
Yeah.
Fairy people kidnapping children, is that UFOs? And then they tie it to like John Dee's angelic things or whatever, and it would the whole thing,
John Dee might end up showing. He takes place much later, but like I want to work that stuff into there as well.
Yeah,
like I'm going to start out with a lot of like true history as much as I can for William of Newbury. But if I get to go further, it'll get weirder and stuff.
That's great. I can't wait.
And that'll be out in May from Dark Horse.
You're at the point now where you pitch something, they're yesing it right away, or.
I mean, yes and no. There's always considerations. Like they have to figure out how to sell something. So like an editor will say yes, but then the editor will have to bring it to like costing and stuff and figure out like, is there an audience for this kind of thing? And I've had projects where either there wasn't a right place for it, or the finances wouldn't quite line up, because they felt like, oh, they can only sell this much for it. And that's all understandable. And it's, again, it's a really interesting place that we're at where there are options now. So because of crowdfunding, I've done a couple crowdfunding books. I plan on doing more. It's a lot of work, very rewarding. And then if, you can't find a place or a home for something anymore, it doesn't feel so personal, and it's easier to get all kinds of wild things out. Yeah, so it's a strange world, but I am lucky that I get looked at. I don't have to fight for the attention. So that's nice.
Well, how is Blue Book doing? Blue Book is selling well.
Yeah, it's doing really well, especially the trades, because again, like it, once it gets out into like it's a book market kind of book, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah. When people see that on the shelf, it's going to be something that really interests them.
Yeah.
Like a non-comic book reader like my wife who just saw it and said, "Oh, this is, I would like to read."
Yeah. And we are working on the next arc. So the stuff that's coming out now, we're working on fresh stuff after that. So
right now,
something after 1947.
Yeah, we're in 47
Yes.
right now, right? So are you going back further or coming?
Can't really say.
Okay.
It's a little bit different.
Perfect. I'm glad it keeps coming.
I can't wait to talk about it because it's
coming.
It's a fun concept. Yeah.
Because it's really. I'm honestly, I'm a big superhero guy, and that's 90% of what I buy is superhero stuff. But something like this comes along, it's just so interesting. It's so different than anything else out there. It's been really enjoyable. It's
weirdly timely too, because like if you're into like what's happening in the UFO field, there, even if you're not, I'm sure you're aware that like the Navy had released I think it was back in 2017 all this weird footage and stuff.
Yeah,
and like they started having hearings with Congress, and they started like talking about like the government actually coming out and saying like, yeah, there's something out there, we don't know what it is. They were talking like this might be dimensional, like from Congress and stuff.
And nobody reacted.
No one reacted.
I couldn't believe it. There was a guy who sat in front of Congress and said, "We have alien biologics." That's the exact term he used.
Yep.
And nobody reacted. I was sitting on the TV going, "Am I the only one getting this?"
Yeah.
Why are we going crazy?
Yeah, and then what's interesting is this is all following the Blue Book history. So the stuff that we're writing about in the 50s, it's the same stuff happening now. So now we're seeing the stage where they're starting to roll stuff back.
Right.
Where like there was this new report that came out of forget all the acronyms, it's like Arrow or something, where now they're saying there is no pertinent proof that we have anything extraterrestrial or anything like that. And like in the report, they don't mention those videos, like the Tic Tac videos.
Yeah.
It's not like the videos themselves are the end all be all, but there's the information that goes behind that, the witnesses.
Right.
Those things were seen not in a vacuum. Like you'll watch like Neil deGrasse Tyson he'll dismiss them because he can talk about like the glitches that could be in the machinery.
Right, sure.
But there were multiple witnesses. There were the pilots were seeing this. They were seeing more stuff that didn't even show up on the radar.
Right.
There are multiple pilots who saw this stuff. So it's not like it was just a radar glitching. Like they saw it with their eyes.
Well,
and there's a bunch of these reports, and all of those were left out of this report. So there's always this weird governmental thing of like stepping forward to say they're going to that there's more to it, and then they roll it back. And we're kind of showing that in Blue Book as it's happening in real time right now.
Right. It's really very timely. It is. It's one of the best things about it is that it ties so well into what happened. When did that happen? Like I sat in front of Congress and said that recently, and
that was long. You're talking about the David Grush. I think was the latest ones. He was one of the last whistleblowers that came forward.
I think
there was Lou Elizondo. I think he was one of the first who kind of came out.
Yeah, I couldn't remember his name off the top of my head right there.
Yeah. But, I mean, what's interesting to me is whether this is aliens or not, I think it shows that there's this is all about information control on some level.
Yeah.
Information about like whatever is going on behind the government's files and stuff. Like I think it has a lot more to do with money, budgets, the way we have like a pipe stove kind of information.
Yeah.
Where everything is firewalled from each other. So I think we're seeing a lot of like internal information wars between different departments and stuff. And it's always money, right?
Sure.
Because there's private contractors involved in this, and people get kickbacks for that kind of stuff. And like you'll get like $20 million grant to study a ranch someplace out in the middle of nowhere. And it's like, well, is it about the money or is it about the phenomena? Like,
Right. Yeah.
So like it's almost always about money and information, and like especially in these days when everything is about information.
Yeah.
It's just manipulation, maybe. I don't know.
The one thing I find encouraging about it all, and the reason I think I enjoy things like Blue Book and all that stuff, is that it just kind of reinforces your suspicion that the world's a lot weirder
For sure.
than you really first appreciate.
Yeah.
And as you get older, you kind of sit back and go, yeah, there's a lot of stuff I'm just not going to understand. And I think that's kind of good in a way, because it just...
I struggle with that, because sometimes I feel like it's disarming me too much. but I've definitely calmed down about a lot of things because I've just learned that like usually we're missing context.
Yeah.
There's usually more to the story, whether it's insidious or not.
Right.
Just missing parts of a story.
Mhm.
So instead of reacting to things, like even when all of this happened with this sort of recent disclosure,
Mhm.
I didn't go like, "Oh my God, disclosure is coming," because I was aware of the history. So I was like, "Well, let's wait and see what happens before we get too excited."
Mhm.
And I think it's been worth waiting because I think nothing's really changed. I don't feel like there's steps backwards from when the whistleblowers came out.
Right.
I think there's just more proof that for whatever reason, the information just doesn't want to be shared. Maybe just because it changes the dynamics of how information is shared from the government too much.
Yeah.
Like having nothing to do with what the truth is, or if there's something useful or insidious or conspiratorial or not, or benign. It's just information in the way that, that take the government and make them act in a different way.
Yeah.
To give up information that they don't need to give up. I just don't think that that's going to happen.
No, probably not, especially not in this climate.
Yeah.
Yeah, where the world seems to be getting a little bit scarier.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gets scary, but also as you get older too, you go, we survived the 70s.
Yes.
Like people are freaking out now. It's like, you don't remember, like just watch a documentary about the 70s. Cities were burning, politicians were being shot left and right.
Yeah.
The economy was way worse than it is now. And like, not to say everything's going to be fine because we survived the 70s, but like it shows that there's a will of people to survive as a society.
Right.
Like we need to go forward, no matter how crazy things seem. And it was crazy. Just watch stories about the 70s.
Yeah. That's when we sound like old men. Back when we were kids, it's a lot crazier than it is now.
You think it's bad now?
You think this?
But I walked up and down this, but we also didn't have other
crazy
problems.
Well,
so,
even just look at the difference in New York as take New York in the 1970s and compare New York in 1970s. Like people saying now, there's been instances recently in New York with the subways and people get, but back in the 70s, that was a daily occurrence. That happened
that was not
all the time. And now
also the way information travels now, like
could you imagine the 70s we had what we had now, how different it would be? Like I mean, just
you couldn't even report on it. Like just what was happening in the Bronx. It was so insane. Mass fires, they were just burning down buildings and like decimating, like it looked like Dresden. And nobody was doing anything. People were just making money off of it, and like,
and now one thing happened in the big news. Back then, it literally was growing up. You couldn't keep up with how many people were.
Yeah. If you look at the summer of 1977, you've got the blackout.
Yeah.
The Bronx burning. You've got the Son of Sam coming around.
Was it Son of Sam at the time?
Yeah.
Same summer. Yeah. You've got disco going big in Midtown. You got punk going crazy in downtown.
Yeah, the beginnings of
happening in the Bronx. It was too much. Yeah, it was like if you really look at that.
Imagine trying to report on that now with all the instantaneous news. Like, I mean, I'm assuming you're kind of in the same place I am now. Like, whenever I see any news online, I just don't really believe it. No. I'll have to do like a bunch of research to find out. Absolutely. Is it a real story? Did this actually happen?
Yeah.
Like especially on TikTok, which I've really been enjoying, but I have no doubt that it's being used to manipulate people because
of course.
It's just so insane. And the amount of research I have to do every time I get panicked on something on like, should I be stocking food right now because the eclipse is coming?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's Monday, right? We should be stocking up on the solar flare and the eclipse at the same time. Yeah.
Is that? Yeah.
The eclipse is Monday.
Eclipse is April 8th.
I thought it was Monday.
I thought it was April 8th.
What do I know?
And the solar flare on Monday too?
Yes, during the eclipse. That's what people worry about. The powers are going to go.
Oh, that's what it is? Okay.
Not in this house.
Well, we all have a lot of good reading material if the electricity goes. We read the comics. I work a lot digitally, but I still have my sketch pads.
Yeah. And he's going to go backwards.
That's funny because with the two of us, Brian reads digitally. I don't.
Time out.
I have stop. I'm telling my part. So I have on the you're seeing us this way. On the other side of us, there are about 10 file cabinets filled. So I have something like 12,000 comic books in the basement right now. So I read.
So you've got bartering material for the end times.
So he doesn't. I do.
I buy Independence on paper and I read the two bigs digitally.
Yeah, I'm a mix and match.
Yeah.
Sort of depends on the stuff.
Right.
I don't think there's a right way or wrong way. And it's interesting because like we all remember when digital first came around and there was lots of fears of like, oh, will this destabilize the market and this kind of stuff. And And again, there's a will for something to exist that'll just go forward, you know.
Absolutely. So, I wanted to ask you a question that I've asked a couple of other comic creators that we've talked to. Do you remember if there's one comic you read when you were younger that either convinced you wanted to get into comics, or that you realized, oh, there are people doing this?
Absolutely. And it's one of the few comics that I can name numbers on and stuff. It was X-Men Annual 9, where they went to Asgard.
Oh, okay.
And it, like, up till then, I was like tracing comics, and I don't know that I understood what a career was yet, because I was like 12 or 12 something. And I was like tracing comics and just really enjoying just drawing that stuff. And then when I saw
Adams, that's Arthur Adams.
Yes.
Brother?
Yeah, and when I saw Art Adams, like, he so stood outside of everybody else. That book looked so different and had so much energy. And then and I saw all these names, Mike Mignola, including one of the names. He was one of the anchors on it. And I think that's kind of when I started paying attention. And it was like Art Adams, Terry Austin, Al Milgrom, and Mike Mignola were all inking on this project together, and it opened up a lot for me. It definitely cemented that this is what I wanted to do. I think then is kind of when I understood that there were specific people for specific roles who had specific identities and stuff.
Yeah.
And it opened up my eyes to more mythology stuff as well. I wanted to be Art Adams for a long time. Like, I was just an Art Adams clone growing up, and then I became a Mike Mignola clone now. I'm only kidding. But those influences have always stayed with me, and that book is like that was my drug, that. And then there was that follow-up where they went with New Mutants, went to Asgard and stuff, and just all that stuff just blew my mind. The Thor stuff and the other gods and gods I'd never heard of, and weird powers that were kind of like superhero powers but weren't superhero powers. And
do you still have it?
I don't have the original copies that I don't think so, but I've definitely just picked up other copies along the way. I'm not very nostalgic with stuff, and I've definitely gone through that stage because I moved a lot. Where I just purged.
Yeah, because you don't want to torture the movers like that.
I don't want to torture myself anymore. I'm just being an artist, so it's not the comic books that were a problem. More, it was like there was two. One was there was books and DVDs. Now, I'm glad I kept a lot of my DVDs, like, as we kind of learn a lesson about, like, streaming and all that kind of stuff. But I definitely stopped being nostalgic about physical objects for sure.
Right. Yeah. That's funny. You reminded me of when I first moved to Staten Island. I grew up out on Long Island, and then I moved to Brooklyn, and then I moved to Staten Island. And when we moved from Brooklyn to Staten Island, I distinctly remember one of the movers turning to me at one point with this angry look on his face and going, "You got a lot of books."
Yeah, it's not the furniture. They know about the furniture.
Right.
Books. Yeah.
They came here. Finally got moved.
Right. Oh, he's like, "You got a lot of books."
That's
he's so angry.
I have a question about this. How did this happen? Just how did you get
one of my favorite characters of all time, by the way?
And it's always been very interesting to us that DC Comics pulls him in as a character at one point, but only uses him for a very short period. And you worked on the book, right? 6 issues, if I remember correctly.
That might be why it was only a short period of time.
And this was early on in your career, correct?
Exactly.
Because you did this and this at about the same time.
Yeah. Just as, like, before Foot Soldiers, Judge Dredd, I had done like a bunch of little things. There's a bunch of inking. I inked like just an issue of Daredevil Fall from Grace with McDaniel. And I was just working with editors on a bunch of little stuff. And I was very young, and I was showing a lot of potential. So when this book came around, Andy Helfer was writing it, and he just saw a growing artist. And it was my first penciling and inking job. Was,
This is your first. This is your first one.
Yeah. That was my first like full penciling inking job for a company. I'd done independent stuff before that, and it was a huge learning lesson. Like, I wasn't quite ready for it. There's a work regimen that when you're younger, and this isn't true for everybody, but this was true for me. I felt the need to like build up an inspirational fuel that would, get me through pages and drawing for long periods of time and stuff. So I think I had trouble. It was more work than I was prepared for, I think, and I was somebody who was drawing all of the time.
Right.
But there's still like making comics is a specific kind of discipline. And it's almost like you could be a really good sports person where you're doing a whole bunch of different sports, but to be able to do that marathon that it takes to do a comic is hard. Mm-hmm. So I only lasted like really 4 to 5 issues, and they were spotty, and it wasn't that I wasn't trying, right. It was just a lot, yeah. And I was really young. I think I was 20 at the time. So I learned a lot of great lessons. I had a lot of great mentors there. Paul Kupperberg was the editor, and he really saw me through a lot. And Andrew Helfer, and that's a couple of those covers are still I'm really happy with. There's one where he's holding a gun, almost like Pulp Fiction style, and I'm still super proud of that. I still look at that and go, "Oh, that was good. That was good."
But a very weird just title to begin with. You have Judge Dredd being in 2000 AD for so long, and then DC gets him, and it can't be the same.
There was Eagle doing the reprints,
right? But it can't be the same as a regular Judge Dredd story. So
the idea is too is they knew that most of the sales were going to go to the direct market American audience.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So for better or for worse, they wanted to rate it for more of an American audience, right? So. And then my art style, I think, worked because I'm an odd guy. I mean, my art style has always been odd. Like, it's not quite mainstream. So I think it fit really, really, really well for Judge Dredd. But it was a square peg in an industry that didn't like different shapes.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And as growing up, that was Judge Dredd we've always heard about it here, but it was really hard to get copies of Judge Dredd.
Yeah. I managed to get some of the Eagle ones when I was very young.
I mean, but Eagle was easy because it was reprints, but the original 20,000 AD, 2000 AD were hard. And then when this came out, it was, it was the DC version of,
I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was a good try. And I think, I don't know, and it's tough to say. Some books are a product of their time too, and like one of the things I've realized is both with successive comics, whether it's a creator, whether it's a title, or an idea, it has a lot more to do than the quality of the work. A lot of it is timing in society. Is this the right book for the right time?
Sure.
Judge Dredd came out during a time in England where I'm not a politician. I'm not a historian. So I apologize to any Britons that I've got this completely wrong on, but it seemed like they were almost living in this really totalitarian, almost fascist-like state at the time where things were really bad. Things were really, it was like the Bronx in New York and stuff, right?
Yes.
People were just being left behind. So Judge Dredd's like dark, sarcastic, the sense of humor with the violence and stuff. And this is where punk came from, largely. Not entirely, but largely, right? So the timing for that, the timing for that made that book all make sense, all the satire and stuff. Powers, when it came out, it was time for these sort of commentaries on superheroes.
Right.
But if Powers came out now, like I think it would do okay. If it was a brand new book that came out, it would do okay.
Right.
But like because there's been so much commentary and deconstruction about superhero stuff.
Yeah.
So even Power is a success. It had a lot to do with the time that it came out, what people were ready to hear. Brian's career was also tangentially jumping off over at Image with Spawn type titles like Sam and Twitch and Spawn, and then the very beginnings of Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So not only did that association not hurt, like it just helped elevate everything. So something like Judge Dredd, why it did or didn't take off. With DC, or even when IDW had it, a lot of times I don't think it has anything to do with the product. There's a lot to do with the timing.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes something is just so great, it doesn't matter when it came out. But, those are those super special kind of far and in between books.
Those are incredibly rare.
Yeah.
Those are just, I wanted to ask you about the visual style. Your visual style, like, for example, at the beginning with Dredd and we're looking at Justice League International, it doesn't look like if I just saw this, I wouldn't think it was you.
Yeah.
But looking at the powers drawing like behind you, for example, and the stuff you're doing in Blue Book is very distinctly you. Your style has become one of those styles that you could immediately point to it and say, "Oh no, that's Oeming."
Thank you.
How does that happen? Is that like a slow evolution towards something, or do you make a conscious choice and say,
there was definitely no, this is a good question. There was definitely a pivot point. And I'm glad it can landmark it because there's a lot about my own work that I don't understand, which is a good thing.
That is good.
Yeah. But so early on, like I said, one of my big influences was Art Adams. Some of the other ones was Michael Golden and Kevin Nolan, Mobius. So there was a lot of like I was going to try and be very line heavy oriented. It was less about the large black shapes and more about all the rendering. And I was working that way for a while, and then long story short, the industry sort of collapsed in the mid early 90s.
Yeah.
I ended up like all the jobs I was getting, I went back to just being an inker because I couldn't even find penciling work because companies were folding left and right.
Yeah.
And there's lots of competition for very few jobs. And eventually like my son was born during this time period. So I had to just go and get a job for the first time in my life.
Right.
Because I started drawing professionally when I was basically in high school.
Yeah.
Like at a very, very early age. So I had one job, two. I washed some dishes under the table and delivered some pizza once, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So I had to like suck it up and like bring in money. I had to go get a job. So I decided to get something where I could still draw. So I became a security guard where I'm supposed to be watching like all these. There's this auto trader place called Nade in Jersey where like it's like several football fields full of cars, and I would just sit there hugging cars when they come in. But I'm in a booth and I could draw. And the two things that was great about this was all of my dreams and hopes of comics had collapsed that I've been building since I was like 14. This trajectory of, you start as an inker and you're doing these independent comics and you get little jobs at Marvel and DC. And then eventually you get like a real assignment and there you are. I was being flown around the country doing different cons and store appearances and like money was good and all this stuff. I was developing this style and everything. And then when this crash happened, it felt like everything was going to go away. But what I realized was I loved comics so much. And at this point, I started to understand a little bit more about like the independent field. I basically decided, well, even if I have to just have a regular job, I will still do comics when I can. I'll work on them on the weekends or at nights and stuff like that. And we'll get out a miniseries in black and white every year or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was great to realize that that's what I needed. I didn't need the other stuff.
Right.
I just needed to be able to make the comics. Of course, it's better to be able to make a living off of it. But at the core, this is who I am and what I wanted to do. So that was a blessing, which has guided all of my career choices after that. Secondly, I didn't have time anymore for all the rendering. Right. Even without the job, I had a baby, So that's at that same time, in one of my desperate attempts for work, I was trying to get some work on like Batman Adventures or something like that because the style looked easy and those books were taking off.
Yeah.
And first of all, I was wrong about the style. It wasn't easy. It was to do simple is hard. Yeah. I also couldn't stay on model. But in stripping away all the line work and leaning heavy on like big black shapes, which then got me more into Alex Toth and even more into Mignola, who I already was into, but like really understanding like what he was doing with light and shadow. I stripped everything down and people started to react to it in a much stronger way than my other work, even at cons and stuff. So I was like, okay, this will be my style now. I've stripped away all of the pretentiousness and line style and everything. And that's around when I met Brian Bendis and David Mack at the store signing and just started talking with them. And then it builds from there. And so having everything taken away and losing everything felt like the worst thing. It was a horrible, horrible feeling. But it ended up being the best thing, you know? And it kept me focused on what's important. And even to this day, it keeps me focused and I'm grateful for that stuff. So that's the pivot point.
That's a great story. I love that. But and as fans, I know I loved the
see an artist and I could pick up a book and say, oh, I know that this is Oeming. I know that this is, and that, because I'm a big Kirby guy. So for me, it started with Kirby. Like I could pick up any book and be flipping through a box and I see one. I'm like, I know that's Kirby. And it's just, it's like that comfort feeling. Like I know I'm going to like this. I may not know nothing about the story or what it's about. I know I'm going to like it because this guy who I'm comfortable with is working on it. So I think that's how, as fans and as collectors, we feel about, if a person is inconsistent and it's this one, it's never, there's no continuation for me. I love being able to pick up one, like, and your style really stands out. I have this too, which I'm a big Superman guy.
Oh, thank you.
This is great.
I was so happy with that.
Great. Yeah. I mean, and it's you.
Yeah, that's more your style. Yeah.
And it's such a good story. And how is it? How is the experience working with like a DC, and you did Thor at Marvel for a bit, as compared to working with Dark Horse? Or
they're very different, but they have just a different set of rewards to them too. Like working on, I've done like a short Batman story that I wrote and drew. It was digital, and then got into print and stuff. And it's like really cool. But something like doing Krypton, like it was an honor to do. Like I'm part of like a history. The story was really good, which always helps.
The story was really good.
And yeah, it was just a blast to be able to do that and to be able to feel like a part of this history. So I really, and then it gave me a chance to do something really different because it was so high end sci-fi. There's a lot more like color holds, and even though it's my simple style, there's still a lot of detail in there.
Sure.
Yeah, it was just really, really fulfilling. Thor was the same way. Thor was that was me really that was my fanboy moment as a main writer. Yeah, like Brian Bendis, like he grew up loving Spider-Man. Like he's so excited that it was Spider-Man more than anything else.
Yeah.
And Thor is like that for me because of those Asgardian issues, right? So full circle, here I am now getting to write the Ragnarok stuff. Other times it's been hard. Like I stopped working with Marvel. Not with Marvel, but I stopped writing during that time period. I just had a hard time with all the crossover stuff, and that is not a criticism of Marvel. It was me as a writer.
Yeah,
there's lots of other writers too who also couldn't do it. Like there's something there. You have to have a right headset to keep track of all of that and to enjoy it and to be able to execute a good, fun story. And I definitely struggled when it came to everything outside of that because the Thor thing was kind of self-contained.
Right. Yeah, right.
And then everything else after that, like, and I got to figure out this character and that character and where they are, and it was tough.
Yeah. And you can only do certain things, right? You have guidelines. You can't go do whatever.
Yeah, and I was a less experienced writer then too. Like I really I was developing as I was working. I think I'm a much better writer now. I would really like to do another Thor arc that kind of follows what I did in Ragnarok, which is funny because I never had any other ideas for it, except fans have kept asking me all these questions about like the Odin Force and like honestly stuff I don't even remember. But being constantly asked about it. Yeah. Especially the South American guys. Man, those dudes are the biggest comic book fans in the world.
Really? Wow.
I've never been to Brazil or anywhere in South America, but they love comics like I've never seen before. At least when it comes to Thor fans and stuff. So I'm very grateful for that. And they gave me ideas. So if there's an opportunity, I would do something with Thor again. And like most of my work is creator owned, but I do enjoy doing working for the companies too.
Well, if you could pick any character to work on right now, who would you want to work on?
I have one Batman story. That's really focuses more on one of the villains. So I probably want to do that. Everybody wants to do a Batman story. It's very Batman saturated right now, so I don't know if it's the right timing for it or not. Of course, New Gods.
Oh yeah. Your art would be great in New Gods. That would be fantastic.
Any of that Kirby stuff, man. Give me the Forever People, the Fourth World stuff. I would go crazy with that for sure.
Well, Chad might be the number one Mr. Miracle fan.
I'm a huge fan of Mr. Miracle.
That's Steve Rude. Steve Rude's one of my other big influences, and you can see more of his influence in my work a little bit in Blue Book and definitely in Murder Inc., where it's not quite as cartoony as some of my other stuff. And that issue of Mr. Miracle he did with was it Mark Avenier back in like the 80s, like 86.
Yeah, did that.
That's one of my
the limited
favorites.
series. Yeah,
Yeah,
you have that somewhere in here.
Yeah.
yeah.
What was your experience with Hollywood with Bulletproof Monk?
Oh yeah.
There wasn't much of an experience there. I had much more personalized experiences later. So Bulletproof Monk, like while Brett Lewis and I would also credit like the editor for Mark Paniccia, who's an editor at Marvel. So we've had a very long friendship and stuff. Like I think at the company that this was published by, like Paniccia came up with the title and a vague idea. It's just martial arts book. And then Brett wrote it. And then I drew it. So like it wasn't creator owned, but I definitely feel like it was creator driven, you know.
Yeah.
So when it got sold as a film, while we weren't really part of that, it was just such a really cool thing to see. I mean, it was John Woo.
Yeah.
John Woo was producing it, and
Chow
Yun-Fat was in there. And,
Yeah.
oh my god.
Like, do you get to go to the premiere since it's like you guys work there? Do they let you go to like? Do you get involved in any of the?
Not then, you know. But I also think that was of the time as well. Like I believe now, even as not owning it, we would be like asked to show up at like you know, a thing. But then later on, especially with Powers and some other stuff, the creators are much more part of it and stuff. You know, especially Powers. That's where I really saw how like the soup was made or the donuts were made, whatever that saying is.
Yeah.
Well, they see how many good ideas come out of the comic book world now. It's just, you know, they see how creators can be used to make, you know, better stories, and they've been doing it for so long. And to realize.
And to give credit to Brian's always looking out for his co-creators on his books, because he knows as the writer, like he usually is like gets the attention from everybody, especially in the Hollywood stuff. But he knows the value of having your artists on board, and like he really kept pushing me with the producers on Powers of like, you should be using Mike more, get Mike to do these designs and these storyboards. And it's like, so I was a little involved in the first season. And then the second season of Powers, I was super involved. I did tons and tons of art and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's because Brian was looking out for the other creators, and I think we're seeing more and more of that. And you can also see where that's not happening, and you can see why, you know, some of the films or shows will fail because they're just not trusting the source material.
And it's not like the fans care if it's like the original comic book, you know. No one really cares about that in the comic book world because we don't hold very high regards the comic that we collected it. Then you turn into a movie and completely ruin it.
Yeah.
We support that kind of stuff. No, it's great. Is there anything else? Have you worked on anything else that we might be seeing on, you know, the big screen or the small screen?
Murder Inc. was just optioned by Amazon, so it's an active development right now. It's very early stages. Yeah,
that's
so we have like 3 volumes of that out, and that is a what if the basically started. I asked Brian this question. He thought I was pitching him this idea, but it was just a question because we talk about crime noir stuff all the time.
Yeah, right.
What would it look like if the FBI had never taken down the mafia during the 70s and the 80s, right? And he's like, "That's a great idea." I was like, "It is." So I like to take credit for it, and like basically that's our thing. And basically, it's an alternate universe where the mafia has basically taken over half the United States. And so we have 3 volumes of that out. Again, it's been optioned over at Amazon, so we're in early development stages.
Okay.
Brian, I believe, has announced. I don't want to say what because I might screw something up, but he's announced other stuff that he's got going on there as well. Yeah. What's really fun is, you know, we came up with Ed Brubaker and some of our other friends, and like things are developing there under the same sort of umbrella. And it's like you kind of turn around, like, oh wait, you're here too. What? You know.
So I wanted to ask you. I'd mentioned before that I thought you were in Portland, but you said you're outside, right? And
just outside, and like on this other side of the river is Vancouver, Washington.
But Portland has this sort of community of comic creators.
Oh yeah,
all kind of went there around the same time.
Yeah,
like 2012, 13, right? Like Brian Michael Bendis went out there, and David Mack out there.
Yes and no.
Yeah,
David's a vagabond. He owns several places. He actually owns like a women's shelter here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And,
so
Greg Rucka?
Greg Rucka's out here.
Yeah.
Steve Leeper, Ron Chan, Jim Mahfood was out here. He just kind of went back for some family reasons.
Do you guys? I was going to ask
Matt and Kelly Sue.
Sure, Matt Fraction, right?
Yeah.
And you guys, all still get together? You like because Brent?
Yeah. In fact, I was over at Brian's last night, and there was some other people from town who were over there.
Yeah.
David Walker and I and my wife Taki will get together for lunch. Actually, we're getting together lunch tomorrow. But we do that to keep in touch with each other. Chris Roberson, working with him on BPRD. So we'll meet up. Mark Russell is also over here. It's great. It is like a convention all the time.
It sounds great. It sounds like such a nice little community to have co-creators and all these people working together. It must bring up so many great ideas to be so close to everyone, you know?
It really is. Like
right?
Into a comic book.
And like Mark Russell and I, like we were hanging out with Brian. And somehow it just started talking about medieval stuff, and like we were both into medieval history. I was like, really? So, and as I heard him talking more, I was like, oh wait, you're as into it as I am, except you remember everything. Like I'll have vague memories, right? Like I'll go, all right, this is a 12th century monk, and then I'll look up some keywords, and that was the dude's name. Especially because like when it comes to the kings and queens, they're all named like Henry and Matilda, Edward. They all have the same freaking name. So Mark and I, it's way too early to like announce anything, but we're working on a medieval thing and just getting together, and there's no plans for a publisher or anything like that. We're just gonna start working on it. We'll figure it out as we go along.
That sounds great. It sounds like a great time.
It's a real blessing, man. Like I constantly think about like, it's a combination of like luck and hard work, but it's hard to complain about anything.
Yeah. That's great. Now, do you have anything coming up? Any conventions or anything? Appearances that you know?
We're my wife Taki is immune compromised. She has MS, which was just diagnosed in 2016. So we've literally done no traveling, but it's been a couple of years and we're figuring stuff out. So we're going to start trying some cons. I think the only one that's really on our list right now is there's something coming up in Boise. It's like a librarian kind of deal. So we're going to go out to Boise. It's like an hour flight, so we can test out what is that like.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to do a signing with Books with Pictures in Eugene, Oregon. But outside of that, nothing. But we do plan on getting back into the convention circuit again. Something we were both part of for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I know you've appeared here a couple of times, and you were at New York Comic Con a couple of times.
Yeah. I miss New York Comic Con. In fact, I'd actually like to do more like I'm not going to say yes now, but I mean, you guys would be good to talk to. Is more sort of local, smaller.
We do a lot of those. We like those a lot. We just had one on Staten Island. It's the first time we had one in years, and it was at the St. George Theater. Which, if you know Staten Island, it's a classic theater that was closed for many years. They reopened it. So a local comic guy, they're called KV Comics, he created this convention, and with the convention, they double featured Superman and Batman.
Nice.
It was
like the big shows they're great, but they're just too big. They're
not really comic book focused. The bigger show, the bigger the show, the less comic books is what I've been seeing. Where the small shows, the one we're going to on Sunday is a one-day show. It's the first time, and it's like supposed to be like 20.
Where is it? Cherry Hill?
Yeah, Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
I wasn't far from Cherry Hill when I was.
It's supposed to be like 20 vendors, and that's what that.
Yeah.
Go to the big ones.
You'll probably see my buddy Neil Vokes will probably be down there. He's like one of my friends and mentors growing up.
Oh, okay.
And in Staten Island, do you guys know John Broglia? He's an artist. He just did Nice Jewish Boys with Neil Clyde and Savior. They did over at Dark Horse. He's a Staten Island artist.
Oh, really?
He's really good. He's really good.
Evan Dorkin, we know he's a Staten Island guy.
Oh yeah. I love Evan. Evan is so awesome.
He pops in at our local comic shop every once in a while.
Once in a while, we see him over there.
Yeah, that's. I mean, we're a hop skip from Jersey. So that's Staten Island. We have 2 conventions a year basically now. Jersey, they have one every weekend.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, basically one small one. We were at one 2 weeks ago. We went to one Garden State Collectors Fest, and we try to get one. We try to get to at least 2 a month.
Yeah, I definitely miss it. And I miss the people, the intimacy. When they're smaller. Like if it's so loud you're just yelling at people, across the table. It takes a toll.
Well, New York,
all those mid-sized shows I really, really miss.
New York Comic Con was chaos.
It was too much.
It was
just too much.
It was chaos this year. And it's,
Plus, you always feel like you're just gonna die.
Oh, I did.
You ever get like a crush and it just stops, and you're like, "Oh, this is it. This is how this is things you hear on the news."
I've been going every year. I take my kids every year since they were little, so we've been going for like when they had it, minus the COVID years, like 12 something years in a row. Brian hasn't gone in a while, and he went this past year, and really by the end he almost died.
I was like, I've had enough.
We thought we were going to have to save him on the boat ride home.
I legit had a very long injury because of New York City Comic Con. So, like how far even if you get a hotel there, it's usually pretty far away because right around like the Javits Center it's industrial. It's like,
there's really nothing there.
Textile factories and stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's really hard to get a taxi cab, right? So I'm like a strong, stout, dwarf-like dude. So I'm carrying all my stuff back and forth. And like, when I came home, I started to notice that when I'd walk around, I'd feel this weird pain in like my legs, like my sciatica and stuff. And basically, I had already had some sort of disc problems, but all that walking with the heavy stuff, it caused that thing that all of us old dudes get, old people. And it caught like that was beginning my back problems, and it was definitely because of that walk at New York City Comic Con.
It was either that or getting out of bed, because that's what I'm noticing more and more. I get injuries.
Well, that's now,
get out of bed.
The ironic thing is, we could like chop down a tree or do some tough guy thing, but God forbid you stand up wrong.
Right, exactly. You move one way where I stretched over.
I slept on my leg funny. Now I'm broken.
So much fun getting old. Where can people find you online, or if original art, or I know you have your own page, right? You have a Micheal Oeming.
So you have a few other people on there. .com is my main web page. We're going to start selling books through there, like signed books and stuff. Like I finally went through all of our stuff and organized it. So hopefully within the 6 months you can get signed blue books and powers and anything through there. You can find me on most of the platforms, usually at Oeming, except for on Twitter, TikTok. It's Soming, which is a combination of Taki Soma and me. Because originally we're going to use it to promote both of our works and stuff, but it's just me on there. It's just looking at goofy stuff, and I'm relatively easy to find. It's mostly at Oeming.
Yeah, I'm a recovering TikTok addict right now. I try to avoid it because I realize it becomes like time travel. I open it and then suddenly it's an hour later and I don't know what happened.
It's great with any subject you want, and then it's also horrible because of the amount of like either disinformation or just bad information or whatever it is. Like even like where there all this political stuff happening now where they want to ban it. I'm like, I love TikTok. Please
don't ban that. I felt the same way right now. So I was like, please don't ban TikTok.
Plus their algorithms are horrible. Like
believe me,
your followers won't necessarily see your stuff unless you're like that. But that's happening everywhere, and that's really unfortunate for me and for guys like you.
It's a problem. We're actually having a big problem with that now, because when we originally started the channel, our idea of this channel was the stuff that we collect. So we collect comic books, we collect, collectibles and toys, and we like to talk about movies. And then we noticed as we kept going like this, it was getting worse and worse. So now we're really we're going like this now. We're really only focusing our videos, our content on comic books, because it's in a way
it takes the pressure off of like when people were seeing your posts and stuff. Like you'd also get addicted to knowing that people were seeing it. So go like, it just doesn't even matter.
I'm totally addicted to that. Like I look over, I'm like, and I'll call him and complain. I don't know what's wrong with this, and
it's just the way the algorithms works now. And it's you're not making money for the platform,
putting in the time and making, and then we'll have something that will hit big, and it will make no sense to us. Like, why did that hit big?
It was the day you were talking about hot dogs, and it's like,
it's funny because the thing that hit, the biggest thing we've had in the last like 6 months is we posted that thing that happened at the Oscars. You see the Oscars where Michael Keaton had the interaction with
Danny DeVito
and Arnold Schwarzenegger. That we posted something about that. It went huge for us. The biggest,
weird because it's already a big event, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I like.
Right.
And to me, I post things. I do a lot of the posting. I post things just because it's something that I like, and I'm like, oh, I would like to see this. This is what I.
Yeah.
Well, the big problem is that if you start thinking, this ties back to you being a creator, if you start thinking about what the audience wants, then you're not really creating things anymore. You're just like service.
Yeah, I know. I'm mostly interested in making the work. I'm less interested in talking about myself and stuff. Like, I have a heavy dislike for the sort of cult of personality hero stuff.
Yeah.
Like to love somebody's work is one thing, but like, I don't know. I think it's dangerous. I think it's been bad for a lot of people. So like, I just do the work, show your work. But they'd rather you do some sort of weird dance or talk about
Exactly.
I don't know, and I don't have anything against dancing, but I think if your main thing is being an artist or a creator, talk about your collectibles and stuff, they want you to do this extra work to get attention. And so you just want to share what you love, share what you like. And,
it's like what Alan Moore said. He said, you don't give the audience what they want. If they knew what they needed, they wouldn't be. You give them what they need.
That's just an AI algorithm that'll just give you, a variation of Star Wars or something,
Right. Exactly. Well, I've tried to replace Brian with a pretty girl like 3 or 4 Has it worked?
I think Brian's pretty.
Well, that's very nice. You're coming from an artist.
I have a good shaped head. Like I'm holding onto my hair because I'm going to have this weird peanut shaped head when I lose my hair.
If you ever want to use our faces or anything, go ahead. We don't.
Yeah, I do want the face app that'll make me look 30 again.
Yeah.
That'll
God, yeah.
It's scary, but that really. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And you guys want to have me back on 6 months after some new stuff comes out? Yep.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
When the next Blue Book comes out, we'd
like to and when William of Newbury.
William of Newbury.
But when is it? May 29th.
May 29th. Thank you.
May 29th from Dark Horse. Yeah. Everything's.
I already have it marked that.
I want to get
pull it from my thing. But I'm going to end it here. But I just want to tell you, I'm sorry about your wife with the MS.
No, thank you.
My sister suffered from it for many years, and I fully understand what you're going through right now.
Thanks, man. Well, I hope your sister's doing okay.
She passed.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I'm assuming your wife is listening to everything they tell her to do.
Oh yeah.
My sister did not. The doctor telling, and it got her bad. But I know the struggle when you first get it too. So good luck. All right.
No, I appreciate it. We appreciate it. Yeah, she is doing good. She's producing work and stuff, and
good.
Yeah, it makes me stronger watching her figure shit out, and
It's funny. I grew up in a neighborhood, and on the street that I grew up on, out of the people my age, 6 of the girls on the street all got MS.
It's definitely growing. It's very weird. Like we could do a whole other podcast about that too, of like how much it's expanding very quickly.
Yeah.
I do think they did announce they figured out some it might be viral, like literally it has something to do with like Epstein-Barr, which everybody has. But there's been all these really interesting breakthroughs, and it is strange how many more people are getting it. Every time I have a conversation,
we had in our neighborhood, one of the girls got it, and she actually ended up doing some research, and we had a one of those telephone towers like 2 blocks from where we grew up, and in the radius of that telephone tower, there was something like 20-something women, and it was all women had at some point, different ages that now have MS to different stages. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I definitely think it has a lot to do with the environment, one way or the other. Because they'll tell you, any MS expert will just tell you how exponentially quickly it's growing. And there wasn't any treatment until 1993. It was the first treatment for anything, which is
that's kind of.
Well, again, we could go on. We can make another.
And again, I'm not. This is not going to be on.
No. We wanted to talk all about supporting people and the awareness of MS is very important to us.
And actually, maybe I will keep it on it because it is something that people need to know about. It's something that's out there and more people getting, and just
hard to diagnose. I think there's a lot of people they don't know it. Why am I tired? Why
I know someone who can diagnose people when she sees them because of the way they walk.
Yeah. That's kind of how it started. Yeah, it's crazy.
Did she have the thing with her eyes too? Did she lose?
She didn't lose the eyesight. She just began with like a lot of head issues and stuff, and then like a lot of head pain and just this severe exhaustion. And then one day, like literally couldn't move her arm and her leg. But she's on like a treatment that was pretty aggressive, and it's helped her out. It's just stopped it from getting worse.
That's cool. Yeah, it's come a long way in the last 10 years. The medication. My sister she suffered with it for 14 years. She's been gone for 6. So it was just there really wasn't. 20 years ago there wasn't as much as there is now.
Yeah, no, there's a bunch of different choices now. Yeah.
But thank you. And it's okay if we keep this in, or I could.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Please. Okay. I absolutely want you to. Yeah. In fact, I did a 1-page comic for the Heroes Initiative, who was helped us when she was first diagnosed. The Heroes Initiative, for those who don't know, they help creators who are in financial trouble, usually because of health stuff.
Yeah.
Often because of health stuff, and they helped us out when we were first diagnosed, and you just you need help right away.
Yeah.
They've helped other friends who had other diseases and stuff. We did a 1-page comic for them, and you could find that on their website, and make a donation or whatever.
Yeah, do that.
Are they the ones who also helped Peter David recently when he was sick?
I believe so.
Peter David recently,
we
kind of thing.
We see them at some of the conventions. They have a whole area where they have when you pay those artists, that money goes to the Hero Initiative.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, they're great.
Well, listen, this has been absolutely great conversation. Thank you for joining us.
And we'll talk to you again. And if you're ever in the area, let us know. If you're ever coming back to New Jersey, or
yeah, absolutely,
let us know. We'll hook up. All right.
Awesome, man.
So
take care, guys.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. All right.
All right, you too, man.
Take care.
All right.